You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Welcome back to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today. We have another amazing show lined up for y'all today. Today, we have a special guest, Dr. Allison Alford. She has an amazing website. You can go to daughtering101.com. Again, that's daughtering101.com. We're going to learn everything about her amazing story. She is a researcher, a professor at Baylor University, and author of the forthcoming book, Good Daughtering, The Work You've Always Done, The Credit You've Never Gotten, and How to Finally Feel Like Enough. First and foremost, I want to welcome her to the show. She cleared her day. A lot of people are off right now, so I want to say thank you for coming on a holiday. How are you doing, first of all?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. The good news is, since we booked this, the book is out. Good. So I can show it to people here. And I'm just delighted to be here having a conversation with you.
That's awesome. I'm glad the book is out. When you think about the process of formatting a book and putting it all together, I mean, the easy part is thinking about the title maybe, but the hard part I can imagine is the process of writing. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question because, writing a book, I think, could be different for everybody, how they come to it. For me, I first started in graduate school at UT Austin, and I was doing all what I would call the thinking work, the major ideas, formulating the big questions that I had, and being curious about how adult daughters show up in families and how important that is to families and society. So I went from UT Austin, where I earned my PhD. I went to Baylor to work as a professor, and professors, a lot of time, not every professor, but you teach and then you also write and produce and publish. And so I was publishing smaller research articles about this topic. And so it was like at least 8-9 years, and I was publishing these small things. And then I did an interview with The Atlantic, and my name kind of got out there about the topic. And then I got an agent who asked me if I wanted to do a book, and I was like, yes, I have 10 years of ideas to put together. So when I went to write the book, the good news is I felt like I had a lot of ideas. I didn't just want a book and didn't know what to put in it. I knew everything to put in it, but then the process was narrowing that down. So it took about 2 years to write and format what became the final product. But it's based on 10 years of research and thinking.
And speaking of research, you spent more than a decade studying the invisible role of adult daughters. And focusing on your book, you talk about how the work of women have always been often never given credit for. Kind of walk us through that and that thought, and also what does that unseen work usually look like in today's world?
Yeah. So when we talk about the work of women, I think many of us are aware that women bring something special to relationships. Women are good at connecting, thinking about other people, worrying about them, preparing and saying like what's happening in their lives and making sure everybody's okay. And it's a really special role that women have. But we can ask ourselves, are women good at this because we're naturally supposed to do it? Or are we good at it because we've really been trained over a lifetime? And it's just a pattern that keeps repeating as we see what works in family and society. So I think, maybe it's a bit of both, and I'm not here to answer that nature-nurture question, but I am here to say so much of the time when we think about women's work, we think about being a wife or being a mom, or we recognize, if women go to their career work for their job, they get a paycheck, that's a type of work, or being a good friend is a type of work. But what I noticed is that we don't have much conversation about how adult daughters do a lot of things to keep families connected. So when I started out talking to people, and I would say, I study daughters, there's two things that tend to come up. Either somebody says, I have a daughter, and they mean like a 12-year-old, or they will say, yes, my mom is doing a lot of that daughter stuff with her 90-year-old father. And so we really tend to think of women daughtering in adolescence or elderhood. And so we're missing like 60 years in the middle where women are definitely doing a lot of stuff. So that's what I asked in my research. I did one-on-one interviews over the past 10 years. I've spoken to hundreds of women, and I found out that there's some obvious things women do, and then there's the hidden or invisible things. And so the obvious things that women do might be like planning a birthday party for mom or dad or a cousin, and getting everybody to come and bringing the food and making sure there's a present and calling everyone to remind them and text them and buying the groceries. And so those are the kinds of things that women do that are actions we can see. Or if you were to look on Facebook or Instagram and somebody said, I bought my parents this anniversary gift, or I planned this photo shoot. But there's so many more things that women do, and that is emotional, cognitive, and identity work. That's what I found from my research. So the emotion work is where we're soothing, we're smoothing, we're trying to prevent conflict or resolve issues. We're talking to our brother and saying, don't bring up that topic with mom. You know it makes her upset. And we're doing this kind of emotion work. Another one is the thinking work, like, what do I need to have prepared for next year for the grandkids so that mom and dad are happy, and we're thinking about things in advance and we're spending money on things. And then identity work is, how do I represent the family name, even if I'm not around my family member, but how do I carry the identity of being a daughter? And so things like emotions, thinking, and identity are invisible because they happen in our head and in our heart, and they happen while we're maybe doing something else, while we're cooking or driving or doing the dishes or watching a movie. And so that's why we don't give credit to those things. We don't recognize that those take effort, drain our resources, that those things are a gift to family, very helpful, but they need to be acknowledged by daughters ourselves and by the family.
Once again, listen on Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to our guest today, Dr. Allison Alford. Go to her website, daughtering101.com. That's daughtering101.com. My next question for you is something about expectations. Families usually have pretty high expectations from, the mother, the wife, the woman. How does family expectations help shape the daughter's identity, and also long after she becomes an adult?
What's so interesting is expectations are also invisible, but we feel them so strongly. Women, we know what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. We know how often we're supposed to call, how often we're supposed to show up, what dish we're supposed to bring. We know if there's, somebody has an injury, like dad needs a knee replacement, I've got to be there. And so expectations really weigh heavily and can kind of make a relationship feel like obligation or like it's only work, because we want to do these things for our family. We love our family. But when we're expected to, it feels like we have to, rather than a gift that we're giving that's being appreciated. And we really do. Women learn these things. I mean, as little girls in childhood, we're watching our mom, our aunties, our grandmother, our stepmom, these in-law relationships. And so as girls, we're learning about what adult women do. So then when we get to adulthood, we're like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And so we rarely have a clear conversation with our family. And so that's why many family members feel like, well, we're not making you do this. You just do it. You just want to do it. And it's kind of it's true and it's not. Women do want to care for their families and keep everyone connected, but we also don't want to have to do it alone. And we don't want to have to do it without gratitude or thanks. And somehow that daughter role let's say a woman who's in her 30s and she's making a big effort to get the kids gathered up, get them in the car, go over to grandparents' house, 4th of July. And she's not doing that because she really wanted to be there necessarily. She's trying to give it as a gift to all the family members. So, I think that those kinds of things start in childhood, they carry into adulthood. And often if we don't look at them really closely or clarify expectations and needs and goals with our family members, we can get stuck in a pattern that feels like we can't get out of it, like we're trapped. And so the antidote to that is communication. Talking to your parents about what it is they want, what it is you feel like you can do or can't do, and putting some boundaries around those things so that you're not burnt out. But in order to do that, first you have to recognize the massive amount of daughtering that you are giving to the family and what a beautiful gift and skill it is.
And speaking of boundaries, some people hear the word boundaries and they think it means rejection or disrespect. How do you define compassionate boundaries?
Yeah, boundaries are, it is a loaded word, and it's the kind of word that can trigger a lot of people to feel like, oh, here we go again, boundaries. This younger generation's always saying boundaries. But I like to use the phrase that I've heard many times, which is good fences make good neighbors. And so I imagine if you love your neighbor, you still only want to mow your lawn and you only want to pay your taxes, right? And so, but you want to be neighbors. So I think when we think of a good boundary, boundaries are parameters that protect parts of ourselves so that we can continue to connect. And so we have to try to remember that secondary part, that when someone puts up a boundary, they're not saying, I reject you, go away, I dislike you, I never want to see you again. They're saying, I need a little bit of a hedge of protection around my time or this topic or my children so that I can continue to connect with you. So the challenge for people who feel triggered or bothered by the word boundaries is to try to flip that switch to think instead, what is it that they're protecting so that we can keep connecting?
When you think about connecting, there's another word, enoughness. When you look at that, what does it mean for someone who finally feels like they're enough inside a family dynamic?
Right. So many of the things we've touched on here with boundaries and expectations, what I noticed was that I was talking to women and I would ask someone like, hey, can I talk to you about being a daughter? And she would say, oh, you don't want me. I'm not the right kind of daughter. I don't feel like I'm doing enough. Like I'm not a good enough example to be part of your research study. And the strange thing is I just kept hearing that over and over and realizing that many women are suffering from a crisis of enoughness, feeling like you're good enough or strong enough or worthy of being in a family. And so I dug into that a little bit. And what I discovered was it's kind of a multi-part problem. The first part of the problem is women don't realize what they're doing because of so much that's invisible. We don't give credit or think a monetary amount of how much effort it is to call mom or dad, listen to an argument, call up the cousin and say they're upset about this, or think ahead about, oh, a storm is coming, I've got to help them board up their windows. We don't give ourselves credit for how much we're doing, much less anyone else giving us credit. So we're working so hard and not realizing that that's why we felt burnout. We tend only to count the things we can see, such as gifts, parties, events, travel, money. And those are, if we're not doing a high level of those things, we think of ourselves as failing as a daughter. And we also often have this feeling that our parents are disappointed with us. And partially that's because they're never telling us that they're grateful for our daughtering. And not because parents are mean or horrible, but because culturally we don't talk about it enough. So one of the things that happened in my own family is when I started doing this research, I told my mom, why does nobody ever say, good, that was some good daughtering, or thank you for daughtering me today? And so she started saying that to me sometimes, like when I would call and she knew I was really busy all day long, but I made time for a 45-minute phone call. And I told her all about the kids and I told her about work and I listened about her life. And she would say at the end, thank you for giving me this time. Like, thank you for daughtering me today. And it was really silly and cringy at the beginning. Like it felt kind of, fake. But I realized that my heart really liked it. I felt like it was a gold star. And, sometimes we do that in other roles. Like if our spouse unloads the dishwasher or they make a great barbecue meal for us, we might say, thank you. That was so good. Or, you did the dishes? I didn't know you were going to do that. I really appreciate it. And we know in our romantic relationships, we have to be appreciative or that person's not going to stick around. But we, for some reason, don't do that as much for women in the daughter role because it seems obligatory. It seems expected. It seems like that's just part of the role. So that's something we can change communication-wise, is putting some language around that so that women can feel like enough. There's a scientific term, a psychological term called mattering. When we feel like our work matters, when we feel like we matter to the family system, we're like, sign me up. I'll do more. I'll do triple. And so it's kind of funny how just that noticing and mattering can really improve that feeling of enoughness, and it can regenerate even more family connection.
Once again, listen on Refocused Radio and watching this online, talking to our guest today, Dr. Allison Alford. Go to her website, daughtering101.com. Again, that's daughtering101.com. Speaking of communication, we know how that can break down, whether it's in the corporate life or if it's in the family household. Communication skills, I should say, it helps families kind of rebalance roles, if you will. My question to you is, how do we do that without creating even more conflict when we have dialogue? Because sometimes it's easy to get into and hard to get out.
Right. Yeah, we have a hard time sometimes talking about things without it seeming like we're complaining. Right? Like if I say, you have no idea how much time I spent on this party this last week. I had to call the caterer. I went to HEB. I texted everyone. And it really does come across as a complaint. Even if we feel like we're just trying to describe the work to each other. So, we have to start from a place of generosity. We have to be careful as a daughter. I have to be very careful with my tone, that it's not complaining, but I'm trying to do what I call narrating the experience. So for daughters, I recommend trying to narrate everything that you've been doing. So if you are planning an event, telling your spouse or your teenagers or your grandma or mom and dad, yes, I worked on this like 5 hours this week and happy to do it. Glad to do it. We're going to have a good time. But I did this and this and this and this. And the respondent, I have to ask you to try to be generous. Don't take that as a complaint, but answer that with some curiosity. Like, wow, I didn't realize you did that. Or, I had a conversation with my mom and I told her that I was worrying about her health. And she didn't know that I was worrying. And I'm not telling her that I'm worrying because I want her to stop talking to me, but because I want us to be able to be honest and authentic. So if we're not in a family where those sound like typical conversations, I just want to tell you, it's going to take a while to get this going. If you are starting communication like that in your family, everybody else may kind of be a porcupine when you get it started. And it's not but that doesn't mean you should stop. If you know that's healthy, effective, flourishing conversation and you need that for you, keep going. Maybe your loved ones are like sandpaper, but they will come around over time. And you're also allowing yourself to be authentic. And you're also training the next generation that it's okay to talk about these things. So communication skills and patterns, they don't change quickly. In a way, it's like putting on a pair of braces. It's going to take 3 to 5 years for those braces to do their job. And there may be days that are painful along the way, but you will know I am on the right path. I am moving forward. So I would say, again, to summarize, daughters, narrate. Tell everyone what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're emotionally spending time on, what things mean to you, and ask for feedback or praise or gratitude. And parents or other family members, when you hear this stuff, don't laugh it off and be like, oh, that was so hard for you. Take it with curiosity and gratitude. And I think it's kind of a spirit of kindness that if we just try to be kind and gentle with each other, then more of that will flourish. Now, it sounds really beautiful, but not every family is like that. Some families are just sarcastic and, snarky. But it's okay to keep going and being a vulnerable communicator because you're trying to start something new or get it growing in your family.
Once again, this is Refocused Radio, watching us online, talking to our guest today, Dr. Allison Alford. Go to her website, daughtering101.com. That again is daughtering101.com. Not my last question, but my second to last question is, when you think about all the research that you've done, you spent more than a decade on a ton of research, and you also have been able to learn a lot of things as well with these studies. What has surprised you the most about modern family relationships and the pressures that daughters carry?
Yeah. What surprised me the most in my research, I went out and I was asking women, what do you do as a daughter? What is their struggle? What is difficult? And I would have these interviews with women and they'd be like, my mom expects this, this, and this. My siblings are so needy, blah, blah, blah. And it would be almost like a venting session. And then we get to the end of the interview and the women would say, but I love them. I'm going to keep them. I still want to be around them. And what I realized was women need spaces to vent and to be authentic and maybe, grouse or complain a little. But it's like most things. I do that about my work day. I do that about my lawn. I complain about my kids. But the thing is, it doesn't mean that I want to quit. I love these people. Daughters love their families, and they're just looking for some spaces to let off steam, and then they're going to get right back to it. And so the more that we can communicate and let those out, like letting, the steam out of a pot that's about to blow, then we can get right back to cooking. And so I think that's such an important thing for all of the family members to be aware of and for daughters to be aware of. We need spaces to talk about all the different types of our roles in life. And so I might go to a girlfriend and just say a couple things about my marriage. I might go to my sister and say a couple things about my kids. I need a space also to talk about and vent about being a daughter, but then sign me up. I'm going to go back in there and I want to keep going. So I want to tell families, the point of this is not at all to disconnect or create tension by bringing up some of these issues. The point is to feel relief, to feel like other people are in this with me. I'm not alone. And once I share some of the things I'm going through, I'm going to get right back to it. And we're going to connect and be even stronger.
You can get a copy of her book, Good Daughtering, the work you've always done, the credit you've never gotten, and how to finally feel like enough. It is out ready for you to get right now. Make sure you get it over the weekend. This interview is going to be out by Sunday. So you have a lot of time with the holidays. People are celebrating 250. I just got to quick plug there. Everyone's liking that number, and you should be happy about that. It's a great thing to be happy about. So once again, want to say thanks for you being on the show. But before we go, if you have one message to a woman who's watching this, a daughter, and they feel that, man, anybody be inspired, I'm just going through a little moment right now, what words of encouragement would you give to that daughter?
Daughter, lady, woman, wife, mother, doer of all the things, you are already enough. You are doing so much more daughtering than you or anyone else has recognized. But if you take a beat to think about it, you will know and you will believe and feel that that is true. And by acknowledging that, there is relief. We are in this together. We are in a daughterhood of women, and you can share that sentiment with your friends or your partner or your kids or your parents and your siblings, and find some partnership so that you can offload some of these things and then get right back to it. Because the beautiful thing in life is having a family and being able to count on them and reconnect with them. But it doesn't happen by magic. It doesn't happen by luck. It happens through strategic communication and choices, and you are allowed to make those choices to make your life better. So the last thing I'll say is I was raised in San Antonio. Shout out to San Antonio, Texas. Thank you so much for having me today.
You just made the weekend 10,000 times better because you said that. So yeah, I appreciate that. And this, I didn't even tell you after the interview. I usually wait till after the interview. This is definitely be on the radio. So there you go. San Antonio on 9:30 a.m. The Answer. Once again, been talking to our guest, Dr. Allison Alford. Go to her website, daughtering101.com. That's daughtering101.com. Like always, want to say to you, thank you for your time.